Gold is up sharply over the past year. It is sitting near its record highs, and every few weeks, somebody with a microphone tells you it is over. If you own gold right now, you have heard it. The top is in. The rally is exhausted. Take your profit before it all comes back down. And if you have been standing on the sidelines this whole time, waiting for the pullback that lets you in, you have heard the opposite whisper, the one that says you already missed it, so why bother? Both of those voices are talking about the same thing the title of this video is talking about. Gold, up strongly, back over $4,000 an ounce, and pushing to a multi-week high. And the flat, stubborn claim that the bull market never actually left. I want to test that claim with you. Not cheer it. Test it. Here is what you are going to walk away with. By the end of this, you will be able to look at a chart and tell the difference between a bull market that is simply resting and a bull market that is genuinely dying. And I am going to warn you right now, so you do not feel cheated later, that those two things look absolutely identical while you are living through them. Identical. The person who sells at the bottom and the person who buys the bargain of a lifetime are staring at the exact same screen, feeling the exact same fear. What separates them is not information. It is something else, and I will show you what. And there is one thing, one single difference between right now and the last time gold did exactly this. That decides whether the words "the bull market never left" are a fact or a fairy tale. It is not a price. It is a condition underneath the price, and it did not exist in the 1970s. I am holding it for the very end, because it is the part Wall Street would rather you never put side by side with the history. Stay with me, and you will have it. So let me take you back, because the only way to judge whether this bull market is alive is to go and watch the last great one breathe. And I am going to drop you into it before you know how it ends. Go back with me to the first days of 1975. For more than 40 years, it had been illegal for an ordinary American to own gold. Not difficult. Illegal. Back in the 30s, the government had called it in, told citizens to hand their gold coins over to the bank, and made holding it a crime. A whole generation grew up in a country where you were not allowed to own the one thing men had trusted for 5,000 years. And then, at the stroke of midnight going into that new year, that changed. It became legal again for you to walk into a shop and buy gold and take it home. Now picture one man on that morning. Call him Ray, a foreman at a tool and die shop, the kind of man a lot of you either were or work next to. Ray remembered being a boy and watching his own father carry a small cloth bag of gold coins down to the bank because a law said he had to, and hand it over the counter and come home with paper. Ray never forgot his father's face doing that. So the day it became legal again, Ray did not hesitate. He had been watching the dollar since the president cut it loose from gold a few years earlier. He had watched prices at the grocery store climb in a way that scared him, and he took a real chunk of his savings, money he had bled for over a hot shop floor, and he bought gold at last. He felt, driving home with it, like he had finally taken something back that his family had been forced to give up. He felt smart. He felt safe. And then gold fell by almost half. I need you to sit inside that with Ray, because the chart today makes it look like a clean line going up, and that is a lie about how it was lived. Over the next year and a half or so, gold did not reward Ray for his conviction. It slid, and then it broke, dropping from where he bought it down to nearly half that price. Everything he had put in, cut close to the bone. And the whole time, the very inflation he had bought gold to escape kept right on burning. That was the part that made him feel insane. He had been right about the disease, and he was being punished anyway. The newspapers ran the obituary. Gold was a fad, they said, a paranoid rock for people who did not understand the modern economy. And now the fever had broken. The smart money had moved on. Ray's brother-in-law, who had money in the stock market, was kind about it, which was worse than if he had been cruel. And Ray sat at his table with a statement in his hand that told him, in cold arithmetic, that he was a fool who had gambled his family's security on a superstition. Hold him right there, with that statement in his hand. We are going to come back to Ray, and the thing I promised you at the end is really his thing. Because here is what Ray could not know, sitting in that valley. He was not at the end of the story. He was in the middle of it. That drop of nearly half was not the bull market dying. It was the bull market resting, catching its breath, shaking off everybody who could be shaken off. And in the years that followed, gold did not just recover. It went on a run that people still talk about with their voices lowered. It climbed from $35 an ounce, where it had been fixed for a generation, all the way to over $800 an ounce by the end of that decade. More than 20 times over. The single greatest move most living Americans have ever seen in a hard asset. And smack in the middle of it, right where Ray was sitting, it had coughed up a drop of nearly half that convinced almost everyone the whole thing was finished. That is the fact I need you to carry through the rest of this video. The bull market that turned $35 into 800 was not a straight line. It was a staircase with one collapsing landing in the middle of it. And the drop in the middle was not a signal that the bull had left. The drop was the bull. That is what a real bull market in gold looks like from the inside. It looks, at least once, exactly like the end of the world. So now come back to today and hold the two pictures up next to each other. Gold, over this past stretch, has run up strongly. It is near its record highs. It reclaimed the $4,000 line it kept defending and pushed on to a multi-week high above it. That is not the behavior of a market that is dying. But look at gold's smaller, more nervous cousin. Silver just put on a display that would have felt awfully familiar to Ray. It got knocked down hard in a fast, ugly shakeout, driven into the mid-50s, its lowest in the better part of a year. And a lot of people who owned it felt exactly what Ray felt, that cold certainty that they had been played. And then silver clawed its way right back above 60, recovering much of that drop in a matter of days, and led gold higher on the way back up. The shakeout and the recovery, the whole 70s lesson, compressed into a few weeks and played out right in front of you. Now, here is where I stop and talk to you directly, because this is exactly the moment that matters, and it is exactly the moment the financial channels go quiet on you. When gold is near its highs, and somebody is telling you the top is in, and you own a real amount of it, or you are about to, you are standing where Ray stood. And the question underneath is not really about the price. It is about what you actually own. And this is especially true if you are sitting on $100,000 or more in a retirement account, a 401k, an IRA, the thing you spent a working life filling up. Because the difference between owning gold you can hold and owning a paper claim that somebody else controls turns out to be the entire ballgame in exactly these moments. That is why I put together a free retirement protection guide. It lays out in plain English how some retirees are moving a portion of their savings into physical gold and silver without triggering taxes or penalties, held inside the tax-advantaged account they already have, real metal they own, instead of a number on a screen that can be frozen or rewritten. If you are watching this on your TV, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. And if you go through it and want to talk it over, there is a free, no-obligation, one-on-one session for folks with $100,000 or more in any retirement account. No pressure, nothing to buy, just straight answers. All right, back to the history, because the rhyme is not finished, and neither is the warning. So the pattern rhymes. Gold ran, gold rested, people called the rest a death. But here is the part that actually changes things, and almost nobody has the patience to get to it. So let me shift gears and be blunt with you. A rhyme is not a copy. If I stood here and told you that because gold went to 800 after its shakeout in the 70s, it will now do the same thing on some schedule, I would be lying to you, and I would be doing the exact thing I opened this video promising not to do. The 70s are not a guarantee sitting in a drawer waiting to repeat. There are real reasons this could break the other way, and you deserve to hear them from someone who is not trying to sell you a fantasy. The clearest one is sitting in the chairman's seat at the Federal Reserve. His name is Kevin Warsh, and he is a hawk. He talks about prices still being too high. He has the market bracing for the possibility of a rate hike instead of a cut. And gold, remember, pays you no interest at all. When the people who set the price of money threaten to make cash and bonds pay more, the one thing gold cannot compete with is a real, positive return on something safe. That is not a small footnote. That is the single force that broke gold at the end of that great 70s run. A man named Paul Volcker took interest rates up into the high teens, made bonds pay a fat real return at last, and gold did not just pause. It went to sleep for the better part of 20 years. So when I tell you the bull market never left, I am not telling you nothing can end it. Something ended the last one. A central banker with the nerve to make money expensive is the one true enemy gold has. And there is a version of Kevin Warsh who tries to be exactly that. That is the honest bear case, and anyone who hides it from you is not on your side. So which is it? Is this a resting bull, like 1976? Or is it the top before a 20-year winter, like 1980? And here, finally, is the one difference I promised you at the very beginning. The single thing that is true now that was not true then. The debt. In the 1970s, when Volcker wanted to break inflation, America could afford to let him. The national debt was small enough that taking interest rates into the high teens, while brutal, was survivable for the government itself. That is not the world you live in now. The national debt is closing in on $40 trillion and climbing every single day. and a mountain like that has to be refinanced constantly at whatever interest rate exists when the bill comes due. Which means that every point Kevin Warsh raises rates to fight inflation lands as a crushing new cost on the government that employs him. Volcker had room to be Volcker. The arithmetic today may simply not allow a repeat. A hawk who wants to be Volcker may be forced, by the sheer size of the debt above his head, to be something much softer, closer to the chairman who blinked. And there is a second thing that was not there in the 70s, quieter but just as heavy. The central banks of the world, the same institutions that print the paper, have been buying gold hand over fist at a record pace, year after year, quietly voting against their own currencies with real metal. They are not doing that because they think gold is finished. They are doing it because they can read the same debt figures you just heard. That is the difference. That is the thing Wall Street will discuss the surface of and never let you sit with. Because when you sit with it, the phrase the bull market never left stops sounding like a slogan and starts sounding like a description of the ground underneath everything. The trend is the debt and the debasement, the slow bleeding of what your dollar is worth, and that trend has not reversed. It has gotten worse. The Fed is the weather on top of it. Rates can soak gold for a season, even a long one. But the weather is not the climate, and the climate has been warming for 50 years. Now, I have to be honest with you about the ceiling, because there is a whole industry built on numbers, and you should know where they come from. There are serious voices, people who do this for a living, who look at that debt and that debasement and make the case for gold going far higher from here. Some of the boldest at the big banks sketching scenarios up into the several thousands an ounce if the currency keeps eroding. And out at the very far edge, there are people calling for gold at $10,000, $20,000, even $50,000 an ounce. I am not going to insult you by pretending those extreme numbers come from the same solid place as the rest. They come from imagining a complete monetary reset, a dollar rebuilt from scratch on the gold sitting in vaults. And that is a story about the end of the whole system, not about next year. The bigger the number, the more it is assumptions stacked on assumptions, and the more skepticism it has earned. I lay them out so you understand the full spectrum of the argument, not because anyone alive can hand you that number or a date it arrives. Which brings me back to Ray, and to the thing that matters more than any target on any thumbnail. Here is the truth, and I want it to land because I cannot say it often enough. I cannot promise you a price, and I cannot promise you a date. And the moment anyone does either one, you should close their video and never go back. Gold could pull back hard from here. It could give back a good piece of this run and make everybody who bought near the top feel like Ray felt at his kitchen table. It could go sideways for years while a hawkish Fed keeps money expensive, and eventually can take a lot longer than your patience wants it to. Being right and being early feel exactly the same while you are holding, and only one of them ever pays you. That is not the fine print. That is the whole thing. Because that was Ray's real lesson, and it was never about the price at all. Remember, in the middle of the greatest gold bull market in living memory, gold fell by almost half. And it fell not because Ray was wrong, but while he was right, during the very inflation he had bet on. The people who folded in that valley, who could not take the newspapers and the brother-in-law and the silence at the dinner table, they sold near the bottom, and they missed everything that came after. The people who were there at the end to see $800 were not smarter than the ones who sold. They were not better at reading charts. They had simply set themselves up so that they could survive the middle. That is the entire difference between the two identical-looking people I told you about at the start. Not information, staying power. So here is what to actually do with all of this. And it is not advice. It is just how a calm person thinks about their own position when the bull is resting and everyone is calling it dead. First, own the metal, not the promise. The people who came through the 70s whole were the ones who held the real thing, not a leveraged paper claim that somebody else could freeze or cancel or margin away at the worst possible moment. Second, size it so a fall like Ray's cannot force your hand. If a drop of nearly half would push you to sell at the bottom to cover a bill, then your position is too big, no matter how sure you are, because being forced to sell in the valley is exactly how right people still lose everything. And third, do not sell into the shakeout. The shakeout is the machine that moves metal from the people who feel to the people who own, every time. Do not be the fuel that runs it. If you were watching on your TV, the QR code is on your screen one more time. If you were on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. And the honest reason to look now is not some countdown clock, because I will not do that to you. It is the plain fact that the right time to think a decision like this through calmly is exactly when nothing feels like an emergency. which is right now. Not the morning everyone is panicking and the phones at the coin shops are ringing off the hook. For those of you who stayed with me all the way to the end, here is something just for you. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account and you mention that you watched this whole video, you can claim a free one-on-one, no obligation educational web conference, a real conversation about what you actually own versus what you only think you own. No pressure, nothing to buy. That is for the folks at that level who made it all the way here with me, and you are one of them. So could this video have sat under some other title? No. You came to find out whether the bull market really never left, and now you can answer it yourself. The run-up, the rest, the drop that feels like death, that is not the bull leaving. That is the bull. It happened to gold across the whole 70s, $35 to $800, with a fall of nearly half sitting right in the middle of it. And the only people it truly beat were the ones who mistook the resting for the dying. The one honest difference now is the ground underneath. A debt so large it may not let the Fed play Volcker twice, and the central banks quietly buying the metal they print against. That is a reason to take this seriously. It is not a promise, and anyone who hands it to you as a promise is lying. And Ray, at his kitchen table, holding the statement that told him he was a fool, he held. He said years later that it was not courage, that he was just too stubborn and too angry about his father's coins to sell at the bottom. And stubborn turned out to be enough. He was there at the end to watch 35 become 800, to watch the men who had laughed at him go quiet. Whether this bull pays off tomorrow or 10 years from tomorrow, no one on earth can tell you. But the lesson of the man who lived the real thing is the one sure thing in this entire video. Do not just be right. Set your life up so that you are still standing when being right finally pays.